I'm Will Hanson and welcome to the Experts in the Room podcast, brought to you by Xtremepush. In this series, we chat to some of the leading minds working in the customer experience, retention and data space in some of the most competitive and fastest growing industries in the world. In this episode, Continuous Conversations, I spoke to CRM and loyalty specialist Nicola Fox. Nicola has worked in retail marketing for over 20 years for some of the UK's biggest brands and shared some awesome insights with us on best practice in customer experience and engagement. Delighted to have you on the podcast today, Nicola. Thanks for coming on board.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I think the best way to do the introductions for your background, and I think people will be massively surprised probably how they've been influenced and touched by probably some of the campaigns you've had a hand with, considering some of the brands that you've worked with in the UK. Might be just to give us a little bit of a rundown on your background working with both Holland & Barrett and Missguided, and probably just some general background on yourself as a CRM and loyalty expert. So fire away on giving us the 2-minute Nicola introduction.
No worries. So I've worked in retail for over 20 years, and I've specialised in CRM and loyalty in the last 11. And you're right, that sort of plunge into loyalty was at Holland & Barrett. I'd been there a few years, but they were a kind of a brand at the time that had big high street presence, lots of data about the number of pots of vitamins and supplements that they sold, but not a lot of customer data. And they wanted to understand a bit more about that. There's obviously huge benefit for that in the healthcare industry. So I launched their first and their current loyalty program, customer loyalty program. And it was from then on, really, that I started to develop that application into CRM, into email marketing, digital marketing. I left Holland & Barrett, went to Missguided, where I did a sort of a similar evolution, really. Kind of, they actually had the opposite problem. They had lots of data, but just weren't sort of structuring it and using it very well. And so there, it was more about kind of making that data part of our day-to-day lives. So yeah, Holland & Barrett and Missguided were big brands within my career history and really kind of defined what I do now as a freelance CRM and loyalty expert, because it was actually in exploring both of those brands that I realised just how important customer experience was within loyalty as a thing, and also the sort of change management. How do we get our teams to adopt that kind of approach of making experiences great so that customers love us? And so now I work freelance with agencies, but also retail teams to make that strategy happen. Because I know that I definitely felt in role within brands that, you know, I was often an executor, but not always able to kind of make those big 500 slide strategy documents actually happen. It's like really frustrating. You know, you have all of these great ideas, you have lots of sessions about it, but then something's stopping you from actually making it happen. So I now work freelance. I work with retail teams to make that happen and really focusing in on that change management. What does it take for our teams, for our businesses, for our organisations to put this stuff in place?
Yeah, I really want to pull on that thread there around change management, and just something that you've said there really strikes me as interesting. Are you finding as a freelancer now that you're having more influence on being able to take that strategic view because you're not being pulled into other things? Is that why you're finding that, or is it just because you're able to step outside of the organisation and try and influence change that way?
Probably a combination of both. I think when you are in role, when you are working within an organisation, there are always other demands on your time. We've all probably presided over that project list that never gets done because you're too busy with the day-to-day. So being freelance, being in a consultative format, you know, I find that actually I have got that ability to focus in on those things that you don't always get to do when you're focusing on a day job as well. But I think it's also about having that very clear remit, that very, being in lane and staying in lane and being there to make sure that change management and the adoption of the change that you're doing actually happens. I think that is also, part of the success. And yeah, of course, some of that does come with the fact that I'm my own person. I'm not kind of necessarily influenced so directly by what the brands are. But, naturally, as any consultant will know, you've got to fit into the culture, and you've got to understand and appreciate that culture. So, yeah, a bit of a combination of both.
Great. And so harking back to Holland & Barrett, because I think that that's a really good example of a massive brand with huge reach and huge history as well, having to navigate internally within a business to be able to drive something as new and as fancy, I'm sure at the time, 10 years ago, as a loyalty program driven by data and built around a customer experience. What were some of the challenges and some of the opportunities, I imagine, that came from trying to build out that program with a brand like that?
Yeah, so, Holland & Barrett was, and still is, a very successful brand. In terms of product, they really know what they're doing. And there wasn't an awful lot that you could teach that group of people about what they were selling. But as I alluded to earlier, the gap that they had was knowing, well, who's buying this stuff and why are they buying it? Because, anybody who's been in a Holland & Barrett store will see that there's thousands and thousands of SKUs. Most of them you can't even pronounce, let alone know what they actually do. And the restrictions within the industry mean that you can't be open about that with customers. So, they really had this gap of who's buying this stuff, what are they using it for, and what opportunities does that give us in terms of sales? Because anybody can put pots on a shelf and sell it at 50% off, but it's in the understanding of why customers are choosing you, why customers are choosing certain products, that then kind of leverages your ability to improve retention, reduce churn, and really kind of make customers feel like that, that you're the brand for them. It's not just a kind of a race to the bottom on price. And so on a very basic level, that loyalty program was what what an A-level student doing, with a slight interest in marketing would come up with, okay? But it's less about that. It's less about what the execution was, because we just needed something that was very accessible for retail customers, something that everybody could adopt, everybody could understand, nothing too clever. But actually what it did for the business was start to give us the ability to create things like product segmentations, profitability segmentations, so that rather than talking to everybody about everything and hoping that they might understand and sort of connect with it, we were then able to sort of say, well, this group of people are buying into this group of products and are behaving like this, whereas this group of people are buying into this group of products and behaving like this. So there's differences in spend, in repeat purchase, in retention, all sorts of things, and then start to apply that across your marketing. Whether that's about, personalisation, which was a big driver at the time. And I think personalisation still is today. It's still the thing that everyone wants to get right. How am I more relevant to the people that I'm talking about? But also underneath that, there were things that really helped the business change. So they were going through a period of wanting to kind of reinvent some of their brands, particularly in kind of high city footfall stores. How do we look different? How do we grow up? How do we become more, more relevant to people who are catching on to things like plant-based and, eating well and looking after myself? And so that data was also beneficial to merchandising, to buying teams, in terms of telling them what's selling where and what types of customers are going into the different stores, so that your range and space plans can change and all that kind of thing. So it had a benefit in terms of just customer understanding, but it also then allowed us to kind of grow our digital strategies. But then also, really important for a very traditional retailer, high street retailer, was to give them something as well that they could use from that data.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting, and I think there will be listeners out there that range from smaller brands in retail all the way up to these enterprise size brands, and would be surprised that a giant enterprise brand like Holland & Barrett might be having the same troubles that they're having with, which is, harnessing your data, being able to do proper segmentation and essentially monetize what you know about your customers and make sure that you're driving the right products to them. You talk about the race to the bottom, and I know with your fast fashion background with Missguided, I can't help myself but bring that up. How different a business was Missguided in the way that they looked at their segmentation and their data? Were they looking at it from the same type of perspective where they're trying to understand how best to engage with their customers, or was it more driven around how they could shift stock, how they could move quickly? Like, they have a very different business model, I imagine, from Holland & Barrett in the way that they're trying to position their brand. Probably relevant given their performance this year, I think, and what's kind of gone on in fast fashion in the UK particularly. So it'd be interesting to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, massive changes there, and you can't talk about Missguided, or at least you can't have worked at Missguided and now talk about it without a sense of loss, really, because something that was just so great and so exciting and engaging to work with, I always kind of say it was not in a bad way because we were careless, but it was like a playground. You were allowed to do things, you were allowed to take risk, and I suppose the differences that I would draw between Holland & Barrett and Missguided was that, when you move from something which is very high street focused, very traditional, to something which is pure play and exciting and innovative, as a marketeer and anybody slightly touching the sort of tech side, it's a fantastic, exciting place to be. You can try stuff, you can you can experiment, and it was a fantastic experience. But yeah, I mean, some similarities between Holland & Barrett and Missguided in that they weren't using data to the best of their ability, but the difference was, Holland & Barrett had nothing. Missguided was swimming in the stuff. We had so much data from lots of different places, but actually it had fallen into the same pattern as many kind of fast growing new brands, in that things were growing faster than you'd actually put the infrastructure in for. So when I joined, it was 2016. They weren't short of data, but they were short on how to use it and the technology and the infrastructure to make that happen. And that's really the change that I and the IT team that were involved put in place. So it was really saying, okay, what kind of data do we want? How do we want to be able to access this? Who needs to access it? And then what are we going to need to make that happen? And I suppose it kind of leads into what my current thinking is really on this. And it's really informed where I sit now, in that it is partly, making data part of your day-to-day decision making and process and implementation is really about two key things. Have you got the right technology to allow you to do stuff? Because if you can't, your teams will be stuck in 10 years ago, where it's really, really hard work to get anything off the ground. So you need the right technology, but you also need the culture to make it happen. If you're lacking in either of those two areas, then your ROI is going to be slow, because you're either going to have a team of people who can't use a thing, or you're not going to have the right technology to make it happen.
I think that's really informative, talking about the alignment between culture and technology. Now, obviously, coming from a technology company, it's something that I'm talking about daily with managers like yourselves that are trying to manage change. Where do you stand on technology as a driver, particularly, I think, around brands coming into it, and they have a plethora of choices with partners that they can choose from at the moment, that'll tick off pretty much most of their problems. I'm firmly of the opinion that the build or buy argument has shifted a little bit, and probably depends on the business type that we're talking about. But where do you stand on that in looking at your tech stacks when you come into these types of brands, or when you're freelancing, and talking about what is needed, what's superfluous, what's the best way to kind of approach building a stack like that? I think that'd be really cool to get your insights into that, given you've built a couple from scratch, and you've obviously worked with plenty of partners in the past before too.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I came into CRM and loyalty and kind of using data within marketing with no background in technology. So I don't sit here as a technology expert, and everything that I know about the technologies that marketing teams can use is learned from being involved in processes to select it and to use it, and being exposed, through partnerships with agencies. And so I suppose what I always kind of say is that, it's not about selecting technology based on reputation or the kind of newest cutting edge, functionality. It's about really understanding two core things. What do our customers need, and what does our business need to make it happen? And that's, I suppose, the part as the marketeer, as the change management, consultant, that I would always get teams to really nail down on. Because if you're meeting suppliers who are showing you products, platforms, technology, capabilities, and you don't actually know what difference you want to make to your customers' lives through this technology, then you're not going to pick the best one for you. And also, you've got to kind of have a really good understanding of how you operate as a business. It's the culture element. I'm not saying that technology shouldn't drive that culture change, but equally, if you adopt technology that is just never going to work with the processes, never going to kind of support how teams and departments work together and solve those problems that you're having, then again, you're picking the wrong one. So it is about requirements, it's about need, but you've got to kind of look at it from, what do I want to be able to do for my customer that I'm not doing today? And what do I need from this platform / technology provider? And the people that you meet across the table are important, right? I mean, it's you don't make the whole decision based on that, but can I work with these people? Can I rely on them? They're going to be an extension of my team whilst I adopt the use of this platform. So can I work with these people? Have they got my back? Have they got the same vision, the same way of working that we do within the organisation? And if you end up knowing exactly what you want to deliver for your customer and exactly how that technology needs to fit around the way that you do your business, then that's a good start place, I think, in making your selection.
You're giving the 101 to the sellers there listening on the call on how to talk to a CRM change manager and understand their business and their customer needs to be able to sell your platform. So I think that's hugely important from that side. It's some great tips.
And I think, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, these things were few and far between. The best that an email marketer could really hope for was that they were going to be able to do some sort of dynamic content, but it would still probably go to everybody. And any chance of personalisation or targeting was really hard fought for. And so when you were looking at technology platforms back then, everything was wow. But now there are many platforms that are all doing the same thing. So it has to come down to, how well does this fit within my organisation, and how well does this help me achieve what I want to achieve? Stands to reason, right? Yeah, no,
exactly. And I think it's something that good partners do with each other as well, is understand each other's businesses and how to drive that forward. Touching on customer, because you've mentioned the word about 100 times today. I think this is a huge point, being customer centric and customer focused. Let's drop in the dreaded C word, COVID. How much do you think, or how well do you think the retail industry and certain brands have adapted to the challenges that COVID has driven with their customers in the last few years? Like, we've had unprecedented challenges around supply chains and logistics. We've had a drive to digitalization. I know there's statistics out there saying that e-commerce grew 20 years in 2 years, I think, is some of the statistics going around. What are some of the brands and some of the strategies that you think have worked really well? Maybe some of the ones that you think have missed the mark or that are falling behind in this kind of post-COVID world where we're looking at a real customer loyalty vacuum, is what I would kind of call it, where people are very happy to shop around, very happy to find the best deal online and move quite quickly on it. How do you think brands have adapted to that challenge?
Well, I think certainly as the kind of COVID impact started to settle, and things started to get back to some sort of normal, there had to be a correlation between that and the fact that I, along with a lot of my other CRM and loyalty and customer marketing contacts, were getting loads of calls, because everybody realised that during that time, and I don't want to make it sound like COVID was like the big thing that made everybody realise this. I think it was there. But I think what COVID did was make us all sharpen our pencil on how well are we executing on what customers want. It's okay us talking ourselves into feeling like we're customer-centric, feeling like we're doing the right thing for the customer, feeling like we're solving for them. But actually it was far too easy not to do that when we had free open markets and people could go anywhere whenever they wanted. All of a sudden, we had this situation where people were in need. People needed empathy, because, you know, I always kind of say, you know, a lot of the times, people come into your website might have been the first time they interacted with your brand. It might have been the first time they placed an order online, and it might have been the first time that they experienced getting something from you. And they were choosing you because there was nobody else. You know, they were choosing you because you could deliver, and somebody else that they might have chosen couldn't. So it was a distress purchase, a distress situation. And the people who I think really succeeded were the ones who already knew how to solve for customers and were already doing that just part and parcel of every day. And all that they did was they just turned up the volume. The ones that got left behind were the ones who thought that they were doing it, but were actually solving for their business need rather than the customer need. So, you know, they wouldn't necessarily have the kind of infrastructure in place to, you know, to improve on their delivery proposition, because they'd been doing it to solve the business need rather than the customer need. And so, you know, what we've sort of ended up with afterwards is that, you know, brands have acquired, you know, the ones that have done okay have acquired new customers during that period of time, and they want to hold on to them, right? Because they, you know, they've probably had a bit of success. But what they're doing is they're looking at them and they're going, they don't look anything like my normal customer. They look completely different. They're behaving differently. They're buying different things. They're, you know, it's just not what I'm familiar with. And so they've had to kind of really dig deep on, okay, it's not good enough for me to just do what I normally do and my normal customers, you know, do what they do. I've also got to really think about, how was it and in what circumstances did I acquire these customers, and therefore what role do I play in their lives? Because that's what you've got to keep doing to keep hold of those people. And so, you know, maybe, you know, to make it very, very simple, it might be that previously delivery proposition was not a massive thing, but now it really is, because you delivered something during COVID that people are now thinking that that's just the norm. And so you kind of got to keep up these things. And you know, the need for that data, the need for that insight, because actually the longer that you keep them, the more you're going to have to know about them to, you know, to kind of meet their needs and meet their expectations of you as a brand. I
think one of the points you just made there is really interesting, that push and pull between brands that think that they're customer centric and customer centric in what they're solving for, but the pull that comes with all businesses, and all marketing managers are probably sitting on the call thinking this. It's all good to say we're customer centric, but when a CRO comes knocking around revenue and around, you know, your marketing budgets and your spends, being able to stand up and defend the activity that you're doing from a customer centric perspective. What have been some of your experiences in and around dealing with that? Now I'm getting into the weeds here of some specific stuff around management and probably managing up, but I think it's interesting because, you know, brands that I always seem to see to work are ones that de-silo and decouple their revenue out of their different functions. So not having a procurement function that's not talking to their marketing function, that's not talking potentially to their deliveries functions, and so on and so forth. The brands that seem to be de-siloed work better in generality. So is that something that you see or have seen in some of the bigger businesses that you've worked with? What are the challenges there that you've found?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, really. I think, you know, let me be clear that I'm not somebody who's going to kind of profess that it doesn't matter about making money from this stuff. You know, it absolutely does. We're all within digital marketing for performance-related reasons. I suppose what I see and how my kind of opinion has developed over the last sort of 10, 12 years is that whilst we used to get that performance from just sending more emails or whatever communication it is, we now don't get that same return. And so actually what we've got to understand is that customers are changing faster than we are changing the way that we communicate with them. And so if we don't think about continuous conversations and making sure that all of our messages to individuals connect across all of the different channels, then it becomes very detached from a customer's point of view. So performance is driven not just by doing more, but doing what you already do better incrementally every day. And, you know, it's not about, when we talk about customer experience, I'm not pink and fluffy about this. You know, it's not about just giving people free gifts and making people feel warm and cozy. That happens when you do stuff well, when you really understand who your customers are, the role that you play as a brand in their life, and then you do that lots. You do that with excellence. And for different sectors, for different industries, for different customer groups, that role will be different. So you've really got to understand what the data is telling you and what your customers are feeding back. But then do that well, you know, and it might be like the least lovely thing to do for customers, but actually that's the role you play in their life and you're doing it well so they're happy. And I think what happens then is you start to see that is rewarded in the metrics that you're trying to measure for performance, in retention. We always kind of try to look at repeat order rate or, you know, retention rates as an indicator of loyalty. And I always pull people back from that and say, look, that is one factor. You know, people reordering with you, people shopping with you again is one factor in amongst lots of different things that are telling you that this customer is loyal. So really kind of look at all those different factions around advocacy, around visit frequency, that kind of thing, because people visiting you are still people, you know, loyal to your brand because they're seeking you to solve their problem. Understand that and then do it with excellence. And then, you know, you do have to push back. I think, you know, this kind of change, this switch from kind of saying, well, never mind, we'll just lose customers, but we'll bring some more in the front door. It has to change, but it has to kind of change from the top down, because you can't just do that from one area of the marketing team. It's got to be kind of all the way down. And the reason for that is the point that you made about working in silos. If we continue to manage marketing channels and areas of businesses in silos, because that's the easiest way for us to organise our teams and our expertise and our skill sets, we're missing that opportunity to really make a difference to new customers, existing customers, high value customers, whatever, however you want to call them, however you want to group them. Bringing together really skilled people from across your business and then saying, right, how are we going to make the experience for new customers absolutely amazing, all the way from the first time that they hear about us through to, you know, their second or third or fourth order. And once you kind of get people from all areas of your business talking together and planning in that way, that's when the magic happens. And that's when you start to kind of come up with things that really make a difference to customers. And, you know, over time, you will see that in the performance. You've just got to be a bit patient.
Yeah, patience is the key. I love one of the terms you dropped there around, you know, continuous conversations with your customers, but also continuous conversations internally with your brand. One thing that has jumped out at me, I've been running the conference circuit over the last few weeks. There was a point made around, as CRM managers and essentially being data scientists, I think is part of what we've talked about here today, like understanding your data and being able to utilize it, that brands are sometimes forgetting that they're also brands, and how important going back to your core brand values of what you're offering your customer, that sets you apart from the other online retailer that's in your space, because competition is so fierce at the moment. Do you talk a lot about brand within your CRM teams or your loyalty programs, and kind of have that at the core of what you drive for the brands that you're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we've had so much focus. The speed and the rate of change in e-commerce has driven us down this route of just making sure that our checkout journey is brilliant. You know, completely barrier-free, completely smooth, completely effortless. And of course, we've all got Amazon in our minds when we're trying to do that.
Yeah.
But for me, when I think about what my role is, you know, very often my role is described as retaining customers, you know, keeping customers with us. That's got nothing to do with getting people through a checkout. It's got nothing to do with conversion, and it's got nothing to do with repeat order rate, because that's actually the job of the trading team and the e-commerce team and the CRO team. My job is to make sure that all the way through, in whatever touch point the customer has with our brand, they come away feeling good about it. Even if they didn't enter feeling good about it, they leave feeling good about it. Because you're right that when we sit down to think about, I want to buy something or I need something, we are thinking about our needs, but we're also thinking about who can solve those needs. Links back to the COVID situation. I'm at home, I need this, I can't get it for myself, who can bring it to me? And it's carried over, it's the same. And so we have to think about ourselves as brands. We have to think ourselves as, you know, people, you know, groups of people who customers are looking to solve their problems. And when we do that, when we think in that way, what we do for our customers is less about just getting them through a checkout, and is more about how does it feel to go through that checkout. You know, and the best physical example I can give, you know, is that kind of adage of Aldi, isn't it? Yeah. You know, I go through Aldi checkout and I go through it fast, but I don't feel good about it. Nobody's having fun here. So I'm going to go back because it's a necessity, but I'm still not having fun. And so the moment that somebody steps into that gap of I need stuff with a more fun execution, with a more fun experience, I'm going to like that more. And I think that's just always what we've got to kind of bring ourselves back to. People have so much choice today. They can pick any provider, any retailer, any brand to service their need. So the USP is not about what you do and the price you offer, but it's about the experience that they have when you do it.
You've hit on a sore point for me there. I was my university job for 5 years was working on a checkout at Coles supermarkets in Australia. And so I was part of the change group as they stripped out all the checkouts and put in self-checkouts, which are probably my most hated thing in a retail experience anywhere on the planet, is going through self-checkouts in the big retailers in Australia, or Tesco's or Sainsbury's or wherever it might be. Not only because it takes jobs away from people, but as you say, it destroys brand experience. And I think that there's a massive rollback on a few of those brands now when they're looking at what they've done with that and how they've damaged some of the ways people shop with them. So anyway, sorry, I've gone on a tangent there, but I couldn't help myself. So a call out to all the checkout girls and guys out there still plugging away and doing some proper customer service.
But I think that's what confirms in my mind that these things are important, because people, when they talk about them, they've got a really strong opinion about it. Yep. It's like delivery. I always used to say at Misguided, delivery is our core, you know, wasn't their core weakness, but, you know, it's our core weakness because people feel so passionately about it. I've given you some money, I want my stuff. Yep. And if you're not going to give me my stuff, then I'm going to feel quite strongly about this. So, you know, if you want people to feel good about you, then you've got to take all of those pain points away. You've got to take all of that disappointment away and just make it as, you know, as I don't know, as pleasant as possible, I suppose. Yeah, no,
I think there are some core takeaways from that. What was good marketing 30, 40 years ago, before we had all of these technology tools and digital tools at our hands, is still good marketing now, but just done in a digital way, done in a way that's enabled. And we don't know what the channels coming down the line will be, as you said. And I think that's one of the huge challenges for CRM teams out there. As we wrap up, I want to ask you a couple of different questions. You're a young marketing executive entering the world of CRM, retention and loyalty today coming out of university. What are the Nicola top tips on things to get au fait with, or to learn and to start to put your knowledge base together so that you can go in and pick up work in amongst some of these great companies and retailers that are out there? What would you be looking for in a junior exec at the moment?
Okay. So I think the first sort of elephant in the room really is you don't need to be a data scientist to understand and appreciate data. You know,
Yep.
it helps, you know, you naturally need to understand your numbers, you need to understand how you're getting data, but be humble enough to say, I don't know, but I can apply myself to understanding. Because for me, data is about telling stories. And so for every person who's excellent at mining data and, you know, coding data to come out with an answer, we also need people who can then turn that into a story and land it with the people who need to understand. So then that's the first and foremost. You don't need to be a data scientist to work in data. I think the second part is really kind of challenging what you think about when you think about loyalty. So we've talked about the Holland and Barrett experience. For me, you know, 12, 15 years ago, I would have said it's all about plastic cards and points.
Yep.
Nowadays, every time somebody talks to me about loyalty, I absolutely categorically disagree that it's anything to do with plastic cards and points. And it's all to do with really understanding what motivates your customer, what annoys your customer, and then really diving into what you can do as a brand to fulfill your role within their life. So really kind of challenge your thoughts around and your preconceptions about what loyalty is. And then finally, linked to that, start to get really clear on how you measure that. Because like we said before, we're not here for fun, we're here to drive performance. And always my intention when working with retail teams is to get them a credible seat around the board table.
Yep.
We need data to be as valid around that board table as sales data. So you've really got to understand if this is how I'm valuing loyalty, if these are the things that indicate loyalty from my customers, this is how I'm going to measure that, so that I can demonstrate that we are actually moving the needle, because otherwise what happens is you just end up being shoehorned into, well, we've got to measure it somehow, so it will be repeat order rate.
Yeah.
And of course everybody knows that, you know, if you're selling sofas, that's a pretty hard job.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, I would say that. I'd say, you know, be able to tell stories around data, really challenge your thinking about what loyalty means and how you can identify it, and then really get very specific on how you're going to measure those things so that you can credibly sit and justify and demonstrate the value that it's bringing.
Yeah, great. I think there's some good tips in there. We feel like we're always accelerating in this industry, in the e-commerce industry and the retail industry. What are your kind of predictions, if you can? It's probably pretty difficult given how quickly everything moves. What do you see coming down the pipeline in the next year or two for brands that are going to win and be really pushing the envelope? Or are there anyone out there at the moment that you particularly think they're doing a really good job with their customer experience, with their brand positioning, and you see them as someone that could be succeeding or someone worthy of copying? I imagine will be the thing that most of our listeners will be thinking about.
In loyalty or in e-commerce?
Let's go loyalty, and we can keep it broad.
Yeah, okay. So I think it kind of links to what I was just saying really about the plastic card and the points. So we have this opportunity now, particularly within loyalty, to really use the technology that's available across e-commerce to help us spot loyalty indicators. So we don't need to do that kind of very straightforward exchange of you give me some data and I'll give you a reward. It doesn't mean that it's worthless within the suite of things that you might want to do, because naturally customers do respond to those sorts of things and it resonates with them. But I think what I would say are the brands that are going to do well are the brands that spot that they can drive loyal behaviour without having to invest in a loyalty programme.
Yep.
but really understanding what that means for their brand. So there's, regrettably, and if I could write one then I might be very rich, but there's no blueprint, there's no thing that you can say, implement that and it will drive loyalty. It's about really understanding your business, your customers, how they respond to you, when they don't respond to you, and then trialing and erroring some things that move you towards that. So I think it's about understanding that you need sort of really challenge what loyalty means within your business, using some of the kind of non-transactional indicators as well. So this isn't all about the order, it's about other things that people do when they love you as a brand. And that varies, doesn't it? I mean, you always end up kind of going to the Apples of this world, which, you're trying to avoid cliche, you don't want to. But what do people do when they engage with your brand? What other stuff is in their life? What's driving them to you as a brand, and what do they enjoy? And if you can tap into some of that and build in those sorts of communities, those common interests between your brand and what your customers do, then there are some non-transactional indicators there of them being loyal to you. Because what you can then do is sort of say, well, if my customers are interested in this and they spend their time doing this, and we as a brand fulfill a role within them doing that thing that they love, then all of a sudden there's a connection between the two things. And as a brand, we're bolted on to their experience and their pleasure in doing that thing that they love. And I think if you can do that in a way that then allows you to be part of their lives day to day, then again, that drives some loyal behaviours. So I think that the brands that are going to do well are those that connect into that, move themselves away from this very, limited exchange of transactions or points and prizes, and actually start to realise that loyalty is about love, loyalty is about choosing you over everybody else, and loyalty is about more than just giving them a discount. And as soon as you do that, then you form this part in their life that they don't want to be without.
Yeah, some unbelievable themes in there, Nicola. I think you've nailed it on the head in some of the brands that stand out, and exactly like you're talking about, it's the paradise or the mecca that we want to get to as brands to drive that love and drive that loyalty. Sometimes it'll win with some customers, and sometimes you got to accept that a few will move on, of course, and you've got to keep filling your pipeline and everything. I want to fire off a last couple of one. Let's go one word answers to a couple of different things. A fast 5 or 10 one word answer to anything that I yell out here that's relevant to a CRM or branding team. TikTok.
Complicated.
Email.
Still alive.
SMS.
Expensive.
Apps.
Had their day.
Yeah, interesting. Facebook.
For my mum.
Yeah. Okay. I think there'll be many users that would appreciate that. Instagram, I'll go there, other products, see if you can give them a positive.
Instagram. Underused.
Yeah. UPS.
There are other providers.
Yeah, okay. I wanted to drop that in and just drop in delivery providers. Right. And then the very last one, and you can be nice on this, Xtremepush.
Relevant.
Yeah. Thanks. We'll take that as the plug. No, Nicola, it's been excellent talking to you. I think some great themes coming out here today on, what it means to drive proper loyalty programs, what it means to be a brand in the modern age, dealing with plethora of data that comes in from all different areas of the business and being able to utilize that as a marketing function. I want to thank you for taking your time with us today. I know our listeners will have gotten a lot out of that. If you do want to get in touch with Nicola about any projects, give the podcast a shout and we'll be able to put you in touch for sure. But thank you, Nicola, for your time.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. Good to talk to you.
Great. Cheers. Thanks for joining us for the Experts in the Room podcast, brought to you by Xtremepush. Subscribe now for more episodes in our series. This podcast was produced by Record Media.